Welcome to the 2.0 Grandma Podcast, a space created by a grandma for grandmas and all about grandmas. Our mission is clear: to empower and support grandmas as they redefine, realign, and redesign their lives.
Welcome, and thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of my podcast, to be a guest. I'm very delighted about that. I have to say, I was very fascinated by your platform, In His Footsteps. So I want our grandmas to hear all about that, hear about, how you got there, coming from quote unquote corporate, right? And now you've kind of flipped. Your 2.0 version is different. And
Yes.
so I'd like to share with my audience just the amazing things. Let me say that up front. The amazing thing that women are doing in this second chapter of their lives, because I think it's inspirational to some other people who may be a little bit afraid to go out there and try something new or whatever. And then sometimes I also think that it will not only encourage, but it also gives you an opportunity to kind of look at your own life and say, well, am I good? Am I happy with what I'm doing right now?
Yes.
Sometimes when we examine somebody else's, we do a self-examination as well. And so thank you for all that you do. And I want my audience to hear more about it. So I like to say that the 2.0 Grandma Show is for grandmas, about grandmas, and by a grandma. Because I always like to invite grandmas on so we can talk and hear what they're up to and that sort of thing. So let's jump right in. My special guest today is Margaret. And make sure, Margaret, if I
Agard.
say your
Yep.
name wrong, please correct
Agard.
me.
Yeah.
Agard,
Agard.
that's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure. So my special guest today is Margaret Agard. And Margaret is a phenomenon in her own right. So I want her to tell you all about it. I want her to tell you who Margaret Agard is, how she changed her life around, why, if she's willing to share that. And then I want you to share how people can get in touch with you and what you're
Okay.
doing currently. Okay? All right. So have at it. First, tell me about who Margaret Agard is.
All right. Well, I am a grandma at this point and a great grandma.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah. I was young when I married and I had 8 kids in 11 years. And
8 kids. Oh my
I
God,
know.
Margaret.
Yeah. And then let me see. My first marriage ended and through divorce. And a few years later, I met and married my second husband. He has 7 children from his first marriage. So where I say, just the birthday cards will
Right.
well, they in because we have the 15 and they're all married. So that's 30 cards. And then we have between the two of us 39 grandchildren. And I have
Wow.
24 great grandchildren. So we have a bunch of grandchildren in laws too. Yeah. And where I came from is I actually have a degree in math, and I was one of the few women executives in the high tech industry, mostly because I needed the money.
Uh-huh.
I was like, I need money
Right.
for these kids, especially for a while. I was a single mom and I had a
Mhm.
bunch of teenagers at home. And at that point in my life, I actually went back to school full time because I didn't have the degree yet. And in the high tech industry, you just had to think like a computer. So
Yeah.
I think if you watch Star Trek, I'm more Data than Lieutenant Troy, the empath. I'm more like, just very logical.
Uh-huh.
And so I decided to go ahead and finish that degree. I needed maybe a year and a half. I had about a year and a half to go. So I was
Mhm.
going to school full time, and I had 6 of my 8 children still at home, most either teenagers or almost teenagers. And I was the sole financial support. So I was working hard. I was
Yes.
getting about 4 hours sleep a night. And that at that point in my life, what had happened is I would, I knew how to make a to-do list and how to set priorities, all the stuff they tell you to do. And there was always way more to do than I could possibly do. And so I would do what I thought was most important, like and finish work on a test I had to be handed in. And this was back in the early 90s before the internet. I mean, you had to actually go to class, hand it in.
Right.
There'd be a sign on the door like the professor is sick, so you don't have to worry about it till Friday. And I think, well, I wish I'd known. I could have worked on something else.
Right.
Yeah. And then I'd go to a client site with something they had out, and I say, oh, you know what? Hey, we're going to pay you for doing that, but that isn't what we want. We've changed our mind. And we want it like, and I think, well, again, I wish I'd known.
Right.
Yeah. And so I was saying, if I could see the future, and then I thought, oh, you know what? I know someone who does see the future.
Right.
Right. And that would be God. And so I started going to God with my to-do list. And so my first book is called In His Footsteps. I gave my to-do list to God. And I would take it and just say, all right, say this. And I have 30 hours worth of stuff and 8 hours to do it in. What do I need to do? And I would just pay attention, how you get that thought that, is God. And I could just look at it and think, not that, but this. Yes. And he would always add something. It was just like to call somebody or it was always something to help someone else. But not always. Sometimes he would just say, also, you should think about doing this. Well, after a couple of weeks of doing that, I was finished every night by 8:00 if I only focused on what he told me to do. I mean, before that, I'd be up till midnight and I'd be getting up at 4 a.m. And so I gave my to-do list to God and got more.
I love that.
More sleep, less stress.
Yes, I love that idea. And what intrigued me about your story is I always say, and people like you and myself, we are overachievers.
Yes.
And overachievers, they don't get much sleep because they're trying to do so much, right?
Right.
I, like you, I went to college right after high school because my parents forced me to. My parents were teenage parents, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so they wanted a better life, And I am one of 6. I'm the oldest. And so they put a lot of pressure on me to go to college because they wanted something better, right?
Yeah.
And so I went to college, and I'm so glad that they put that pressure on me. I thank them today. I thank my mom all the time. I'm so glad you made me do that because I did not want to do it. And in my rebelliousness, I said, okay, I'm going to do it just so she can get off my back. Kind of, teenagers and young adults. We do it so she can get off my back. And so I did it, and I didn't go all the way through, like at one time. And so I got married, I fell in love, got married. Don't know, anyway. Another story for another time, right? Got married, had kids, and then when my first child was, no, actually I had two. I had two at the time, 2 boys. My husband was military, he was all over the place. He was Navy, so that meant he was really all over the place. I wasn't. I was at home with the kids.
Right.
And all this responsibility. But like you, I said, this is the time for me to go back to school. So I went back to school, finished with flying colors, honors, all this. They loved me in the department because I was not like your average 19, 18, 20-year-old. By this time I was probably 26 or something. And so I was, an ideal student. I turned in my work on time, but I didn't get any sleep. And I had these people that I had to manage, because again, I was like a single parent. And so it was really tough. So that was what we have in common. And so that's what kind of attracted me to your story is because, people today seem to think that, you literally like that. I hear the kids say, you're doing too much. Well, I grew up in an era where too much was what you did when you were a woman and you had children and you wanted to improve your life, by, your financial wellness by going to school and getting a degree. And because at the time that was what would improve. Unless you made it born into money, then that's different.
Yeah,
but
well, okay.
Most of us are not, right? So you have to work for it. But yeah, that's what really attracted me to your story. And I love that you said in his footsteps. So for me, what I would do is I would say, okay, now what can I leave off and what can I actually do? Because I always take in too much. Yes. And I take in too much because I wanted to make sure I had food on the table for these children. Yep. I wanted to make sure that I had clothes for them to wear. I want to make sure we had a place to say, all those things, right? And so I took on too much. But I got that. I think I got that from my grandma because she instilled that work ethic in me.
Yeah.
And so, but again, it was always this overachiever. I'm always on 10 or 20 while everybody else is on 5, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it
Well,
takes its toll on you.
yeah. Well, so that stopped it. In fact, God was pretty clear, like, don't add to this
Right.
because I
Right.
know you. Like, I know you.
Mhm,
Don't add to
mhm,
this. But
mhm,
so, of course, I took it back because it got under control. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to keep bothering him with this, my little life.
mhm,
And of course, it ended up in the exact same place, only worse. And so I did it again. But this time I changed the question from what do I need to do to what do you want me to do today? Right. And that's when my life really changed. Yes. It became
I
very,
love that. I love
yeah.
that. Yes. And I was thinking that because I always say, if I have all these things to do, for example, I somebody said, "Oh, I want you to write me a grant." And so I went to the meeting, looked, we talked about it, sent them a proposal, da 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 da. Somebody else said, "Oh, I think I want you to help me write my story." Ghostwriting. I said, "Well, it's not free. I'll
Yep.
send you a proposal." So those two things, and somebody else called me about doing something else, right? So I said, okay, now, whatever God has for me, He will guide me in that direction for me to do that. I can't do everything. He knows this crazy woman who tries to do everything can't do
Yes.
everything. So I just said, so one didn't work out. So I said, you know what? I don't stress about those things anymore because I realized that that's not the thing that God wanted for me. And if
Exactly.
he takes one thing away, that means he has something better.
Yes.
So that's kind of the frame of mind that I had to use in order to kind of calm myself down and not do so much.
I say that to my kids all the time. And now they say it back to me. Like, we
Mm,
were really praying we'd get this house. We didn't get it, but God has a better one in mind. That's what they would say. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And that's what's been my saving grace because that old saying, God takes care of babies and fools, and so I'm not a
Yeah.
baby. So that means I'm in the other
Yeah.
category.
Yeah.
And so that makes sometimes we don't know for ourselves and we sometimes can't say no. And so we say, okay. So then I look at, okay, now how many projects do I have going on? I tell you what, I'm gonna let God take care of that. And if that thing does not come through, then it wasn't meant for me
Yep.
and something better will come along. And so that's how I've been able to kind of manage
That's
everything.
good.
And I don't get upset. I used to be upset about it, like, oh God, wonder why that, and try to question, well, why didn't that work out?
Yes.
And so, well, the people must be crazy, or, or something, of
Yeah.
course, it's me, right? Something.
Well,
But
it's
again,
true. He has a
it's so
plan for you
amazing.
and you need time to do his plan. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yes, yes. So
And
that's
I
a
don't think
beautiful
he
thing.
wants us working as hard as we do. At the end of every day, when he was creating the earth, at the end of every day, he said, okay, that's it. Like this
That's
is what
right.
we did
And this is
today.
good. Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We're going to have more to do. And I can wait till tomorrow. We're calling this.
Yes,
I
yes,
say,
yes.
oh, God called it a day. I'm calling it a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that because it really, really helps you put things in perspective.
Yes.
It really does. And I love that idea of, okay, I'm giving my to-do list to God. God, tell me which one of those things you think I should do. Because I visualize it. When I read it, I'm like, I visualize, okay, God, I got I got 10 things here. You tell me.
Yep.
Turn my head. You pick the
And
one.
sometimes by saying, what do you want me to do? Often it was a new direction. Like
Ah,
I had no intention of writing a book. It was God who sent me down that path that I
ah,
didn't know when I started what I was doing initially. I was on a site called Open Diary, which still
uh-huh,
exists. And I was just writing these stories for just inside only the people in Open Diary knew about them or read them. And at
uh-huh,
one point, God's like, okay, now I want you to write a book. And so I was trying to do it like people do, take their journals and figure out how to make a book. And he said, no,
uh-huh.
those stories are the book. So that's
Mm,
the first book.
mhm,
I gave my to-do list to God. And then the second book, my husband and I served as missionaries. We're members of the Church of Jesus Christ, Latter-day Saints, but we're not old people. So we're not like
okay.
knocking on doors.
Right.
Yeah, so we were living in Albuquerque on our first mission, spent a lot of time at the jail because it was inner city Albuquerque. The
Uh-huh,
church was a Hispanic church.
uh-huh.
We helped people fix their roofs and that kind of thing. And then the second part of our second mission, we actually went up to Alaska. It was one of those things like any place but Alaska. So of course,
Mhm.
Alaska. It turned out we loved Alaska.
Mm.
And I learned so much on those missions about Well, I'll tell you two quick stories. So, and they're both in the book. So, but in the first one, that's the second book. In the first one, where I was praying to well, we didn't speak Spanish very well. We're assigned to a Spanish speaking church. A lot of them spoke English, and a lot of us just spoke Spanglish. And at one point, we're trying to give a spiritual lesson, a Bible lesson to a family. And the young missionaries who did speak Spanish came with us, and they interpreted. Like, I could tell the stories and ask a question, and they would answer, and I'd be like, I had no idea what they just said. Kind of how it was. So at one point, we're there, and we made an appointment to come back, and the young missionaries said they would meet us there. Apparently they didn't write that down because we're there, and the other people there, the missionaries are not there. So I'm praying, please let the young missionaries drive by and see our car and know we're here and we need help. But they never showed up. And the next day at church, they said, hey, we drove by so-and-so's house yesterday. We saw your car there, and we thought, wow, they're brave because they need a lot of help. Right. But what I left out of the prayer was, and have them come in.
Right. So lesson is, you have to be specific.
And always put, if it be thy will. But yes, and I really felt like God was saying, Margaret, I am very clear when I talk to you. Right. And I want you to learn to be clear when you talk to me.
Right. Oh my gosh. That's so funny. I love that story, by the way.
Yeah.
And come in. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I left that out. Right. Yeah. Because you're like, oh, and I'll tell you this other thing that happened. You repent, you've done things and you repent and you feel like God's forgiven you. And so at the beginning of this mission, these things I had done in the past kept coming back to my mind. And I finally said, this is really bothering me. I thought I had repented of these things and you forgave me for them. And he said, I did. And you did, but you didn't repent of the attitudes that caused them. So
what does that mean exactly?
Well, like some of the things I did were because I wanted something more than I wanted God. Okay, so I could repent of that specific thing, but probably not the attitude that, I'd rather take a nap than do whatever God wants me to do right now. Or, and so someone didn't get taken care of like they should. Or, I would say, well, like attitudes like selfishness and pride. That's what usually gets us into trouble, right?
Right.
And so I specifically, I yelled, so I'm sorry I yelled at that person, but I didn't repent of being the kind of person that would yell at that person.
Right. Okay, gotcha. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. So now, so the to-do list, in his footsteps.
Yeah, the site is inhisfootsteps.com, and the two books I finished are up there, and there's audiobooks for both of them. Some people would rather listen than read. Right. And so there's links to different sites where they're available. And then I finished the third one, which is different because it's more about this second marriage and sort of God put us together. I think if God put you together, it's just going to be this bed of roses, right?
Right, you would think.
Not even close. And so, I was like, at one point at the beginning of the marriage, I thought, this man has issues. And so do I. And our issues are colliding. And so, I don't know. I think maybe I've made a mistake, right? Like maybe I should just leave. Maybe I wasn't hearing your voice. And, at one point, he said to me, all will be healed or made whole. He used the words made whole as a result of this marriage. At the time, my children were struggling. We obviously were struggling in the marriage. And when Christ in the Bible, when he says, like, to thy faith hath made thee whole, to the woman with the flow of blood, and to the one leper who came back and was grateful. And so he doesn't say you were healed. He said you were made whole. And if you look up the underlying word and what it means, it's actually talking about a spiritual, emotional, mental wholeness, not just physical wholeness. And so I thought, okay, we're going to have to work this out because I want that promise.
Uh-huh.
And so the book is how we work that out.
Okay, okay. And so, like, I'm thinking about the words "and made whole," or "that will make thy made whole." No, no, no. What
We'll
is
be
it?
made whole. All will be made
Will
whole.
be made whole. So when you say that, it's really not it is about the physical, it includes that, but it's also about the spiritual, emotional, and all that. And it tends to make me think about this thing that I've just learned about, and I try to use as kind of a guiding force in my work with grandmas. It's about the 8 dimensions of wellness. It's just
Okay.
not about physical, it's about emotional, it's about intellectual, it's about even financial wellness.
Okay.
It's about occupational wellness. It's about social wellness. So making you whole, like the whole person. Because
Yeah.
you're right, sometimes we just focus on the one part, but then
Yes.
the rest of it is broken. Like if we look at what we learned in school with fractions, right?
Yeah.
You can have the whole pie, or you can just have part of it. And so what do you want? You want the whole thing? I love that. I never thought about that. That it meant, because I thought it was just physical as well.
I know. And I think of his, well, first he said it, he said it to the leper who came back. And you think about that he was a grateful person. But I
Mhm.
especially think of the woman who had the issue of blood for so many years. And it was almost like being a leper for her, because if a woman had an issue of blood, she wasn't allowed to go anywhere or sit, and
Right,
just
right,
who
right.
knew how she had been treated.
Yeah, so
Um,
socially, emotionally, that was taxing. Yes.
yeah, so just to have been healed physically wouldn't have been enough.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And a friend of mine used to work in the weight loss field,
Yes.
right? And so she would say that people would come in and get surgery, and then a year or so later they would come back, they'd have to have another surgery. And it was because emotionally they were not made whole. You
Right.
know, it was just that physical part, but deep down inside and who they were not okay with themselves. So yeah, that's another example in my mind of that. Oh wow, I like that, because I am really big on this whole 8 dimensions. And I always, like I said, I've been talking about that for the last year or so now, just trying to help people to understand that it's like this all of these things that are interconnected
Yes.
for us. And it's not just one part, but it's the whole of us, and we can get all of that work together. Yeah, and I love that Bible verse, or that story in the Bible about the woman with the issues of blood, because that is a perfect example.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
perfect
Yeah.
example of us just looking at it from one way and not looking at it from the other way. Wow, that is beautiful.
So I
So,
continue to have these experiences. I still talk to God and say, "What do you
mhm,
want me to do today?" And sometimes I don't, because I'm tired and I don't want to know. And
mhm.
and then,
But
um, but I remember I don't know, I was thinking sometime about some of the people I work with. So we live in a rural area, and
uh-huh.
a lot of damaged, I would say, hurting people come there. A lot of them are on disability and and chronic illnesses because they come from these abusive childhoods, a lot of trauma,
Mhm, mhm.
and they just come there to
And
hide out.
not made whole. Yep.
Oh,
Hmm.
and so I can remember saying once, "Oh, she's broken," or something like that. And God's like, "Margaret, none of my children are broken. We don't have broken children. They are wounded and need healing. And I want you to remember, I gave all of my children a gift. And I want you, when you are talking to these people, to stop focusing on what you think is broken and
Mm.
look for the gift."
Ooh. Ooh.
Let me tell you,
Mm.
it can be hard because, you go in our house, they have rats and cockroaches and pet stuff all over the floor.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I hate to say this in case I hope she never hears it, but
Right.
we helped one woman, and it was like with your friend and the weight loss. I was in
Mhm,
helping her and saying, you decide what we're going to do to help you, and we will help you get your place cleaned up,
mhm,
which we
mhm.
did. And we went for I don't know, for 3 or 4 months, once a week. But I said, you need to be meeting with your mental health counselor because you're using
Mhm.
this mess around you to
Right.
escape having to think about your past and the healing you need.
Mm.
And sure enough, within a few months, she wasn't going to the counselor, and she said, okay, she got sick and we couldn't come, and she was always putting it off. And now our house looks exactly like it did when we first started. And
Mm.
yeah, and right
She
after we did
reverted
get her,
back. Is that what you're
um,
saying? She reverted
oh
back.
yeah, absolutely, because you have to go through that healing process. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and she has now started, because sometimes you start on a
Yes.
path and then you're
Mm-hmm.
like, and you back off and then you go back to the path. And so
Right.
she
Right.
has. Now she's doing it without our help. She's doing it because she
Mm-hmm.
started back on the path.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And thinking about, my own life, like with school even, I started, I stopped, and then I started again. And when I started again, I said, I'm gonna go to the finish line. And then I went from there to getting my master's degree. And I did all of this while I had my children. And
Yeah.
when I had my first grandchild, I think I had one, maybe two grandchildren when I finished my doctorate, because now it's all for another reason. It's for them,
Yes.
showing them that you can do these things as
I'm
well.
doing the same thing. So
Yes.
I finished that third book, which
Mhm.
I'm more looking at it for an agent now. The other two I put up because we had a publishing company.
Mhm.
And so I took a break. And as
Mhm.
part of the break, I started canoeing. And I wanted to do the Appalachian Trail for a long time, but I thought, I'm not walking. I'm not doing that. My knees hurt. And
Mhm.
so it turns out canoeing's good. It doesn't hurt my knees.
Mhm.
So I took off on this solo canoe camping trip, to think about what I was going to do next. And when I came back, the answer was very clear. It's like, you should go back to school and get your master's in clinical mental health counseling. So I've
Mm.
applied, I've been accepted. I've kind of, I
Oh,
want my life
wonderful.
in order. Yeah, I'm going to start next in the fall. People are like, why don't you start sooner? I'm like, well, I have stuff to like clear out of my life, right?
Right, to get
But I'll be
ready.
ready.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And so I think he still is, if you're still here, there's stuff for you to do. So
Uh-huh.
asking, what do you want me to do, has brought me to places that I never expected I would go. That's what
Mm.
I say. He gave me a life I didn't even know was possible, and I didn't know how much I would love until I had it.
Mm. Mm. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think that from your story, people can learn so many things. One is, in life, ask God, ask Him, what is it that you want from my life? Because what I'm doing is not necessarily working, right? So what
Right.
do you, and then listen, Linda, listen, right? Because sometimes we ask and we don't listen. The other thing is, okay, really think about, get your attitude in check. Think about, they say, what would Jesus do?
Right.
Right? So get your attitude in check and think about what it is you want to do, because you know that if it's his will, it's going to be the best for you.
Yeah.
Right? And I even love the book about, was something about loving Parker,
Yes.
right? 'Cause it was
That's the
like,
third
okay,
one. That's right.
yeah, we stopped, we couldn't get it right, but then we figured out a way. So it's also a message of never giving up.
Right.
Hmm.
And counting on God to walk us through it, to help us figure it out. I think he likes you would did you teach as ever, like a professor or something? You taught?
Right,
Okay.
right, right. I'm a teacher. I'm
Yeah.
a professor. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So I remember one professor, I was doing a computer class, and he gave us some programming and stuff, and we're like charging out to do it, da, da, da. And then we all came back the next day like, we don't know what.
Right,
And he's like, yeah, that's why I like to get you all started, because then you start listening.
right.
I can remember taking some brownies to go skiing. We were going to go cross country skiing. And I'm thinking, I don't know why I thought this, because they were like 10, 9, years old. And the first thing they did was try to go skiing down the hill by themselves. They were like all laid out, like they just looked like little sticks all over the hillside, right? And so we got them all back up to the top and said, now let us tell you how to do it.
Mhm,
And then they
mhm,
were willing to listen. I think God lets us do that. I think
mhm.
sometimes he lets us just charge off and fall over the hillside and then come back and say, okay, now what?
Yeah, are you ready now? You think you're ready now? Okay, I got you. Right.
And I think also, I always try to figure out why he's asking me to do it. Oh, he had me start a radio show once. He must want me to become the next, I don't know, some really well-known radio show person, right? So I'm like trying to get it out there. And it's like, no, you're just doing it for other reasons. Okay, so that's why I try not to think what I will do with this master's. I don't know whether I'll just use it as credentials to try to get some laws changed. Like you walk in with a master's in clinical mental health counseling, they're probably more willing to listen than, or if I'll actually be doing counseling with people. I don't know, because all he said, he's only told me this step.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a surprise, right, at the end. And you know what you have to do, but you don't know what the outcome might be as a result of doing it yet.
Yes.
Yeah. So that within itself is intriguing, right? I mean, it sounds intriguing to me just thinking about it. I was telling a gentleman a few minutes ago, I was getting some gas, and he said, so, and he had a shirt on that was from my college.
Oh.
And so I said, oh, you went to Morgan? He said, yeah. He said, and I took graphic design and something else, he said. And I said, oh, graphic design is nice. That means you're an artist. You can draw, you can do these, kind of things. And then I said, yeah, I went to Morgan. I worked on my doctorate. And he said, well, what did you get it in? And I told him. And he says, well, and so are you doing that now? I said, no. He said, well,
yeah.
Right. And he said, well, why not? I said, because once I did it, I realized that's not what I wanted to do, because it was too much. Right. So when I think about, my degree is in higher education administration. So that means I could be a dean, president of a college, those kinds of things, right? But when I thought about that, being a grandma, I'm like, I don't think I want to do all that at this point in my life, because that's a lot of stress. This was right around the time too when there was a shooting at UVA.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Oh yeah,
because right around that same time. And I was like, I don't think I want to do that, because I'm not gonna do, I love peace, I love joy, I love fun. I don't like those kinds of things. And so that turned out to be all about crisis management. Having to manage that crisis after it happened and then doing it. Yeah, I'm like, no, I don't think I want to do that. And so then I thought about it. I started counting the number of hours. It would be an 80-hour, 60 to 80-hour work week. I'm like, no, I would never get a chance to enjoy my grandchildren. So I said, I'm going to stay a professor. And then on the side, I'm going to do some of the things that I want to do, which I wanted to write a book. I love doing fashion shows. I love doing pageants and those kinds of things. And then when I came up with the grandma's idea, I'm like, oh, I can do all that, and I can do it with grandma. So there you go. So that's what I'm doing.
Great. Oh, that's interesting, because I had a friend who wanted to learn to garden. It was very kind of the same, but different. And so she's praying about, here, I really want to learn how to garden. I know people who know how to garden. And her prayer answer was, you are going to learn how to garden, but you're not going to do it for yourself. And they started this big community garden where all these gardeners come to help, and they take the food and they give it to the soup kitchen in town. It's like in a city, so there's a kind of a food desert there. Yes. And so she has learned to garden, and it wasn't for herself. That sounds kind of like
so it just goes to show you, right?
Yeah.
God's plan for you could be totally different than your plan for you.
Right. Well, my plan for me usually involves laying down, but
and it's okay. That's the thing. It's okay, because again, I believe that, if that's not for me, then he will put whatever is for me. He will make sure that happens for me. So it's all good. As my pastor said, when we had our New Year's Eve celebration at church, he said, no matter what you've gone through in 2023, the good, bad, the ugly, count it all joy.
Okay. I like
that.
And
I love that, because, my husband said, well, so-and-so, because we were reflecting, right? And I said, well, so-and-so happened, and this, and he said, yeah. He said, that was bad, but you know what? I'm going to count it all joy.
Because we don't know how God's going to turn bad into good.
Exactly.
I was thinking Romans 8:28, people are like, all things work for good for those who love God. Well, we're clearly not talking about the good stuff because we're pretty sure it does work for good, right?
Right.
We're talking about the other stuff.
Exactly. So all things, the good, bad, and the ugly, work together for good of those that love the Lord. That's exactly right. And that's one of my favorite Bible scriptures. I live my life by that, and then I've added now the count it all joy thing, because I think that it's a perspective.
Yes.
And if you choose to have a negative perspective versus a positive perspective, so I choose positive, right? I'd rather choose positive, instead of negative. So,
I have two thoughts for your listeners, because sometimes people are listening and it's like, well, God didn't tell me to go get a doctorate, or, it sounds like, or write a book. But a lot of times the answers are very just one person answers. And I think this one, I'll tell you two stories. So once my husband has stopped eating meat because of his heart issues. And so, but I don't have a heart issue. So I want some meat, right? So I'm like going to town one day and I thought, I'm going to Burger King. I'm going to get me a hamburger. And while I'm in line, they had dollar ice cream cones. And I thought, okay, because we're not doing dairy either, I'm going to get me one of those. And so I go, and it's a long line, and I went through it, and they said, oh, we're out of cones, but we can put it in a cup, I don't care how you give it to me. I want it. Right.
Intravenously? No joke.
Right. And as I pulled through, and on the way back, I'd seen somebody selling watermelons on the side of the road, and I thought on my way home, I'm going to stop and get a watermelon. Now I've turned my little camera thingy. Okay, so it looks like I went crooked. And then as I pull through, after I've paid and I'm picking it up, I hear that inner voice that as God say, I want you to give this to the person selling a watermelon. And I was like, well, why didn't you tell me that 5 minutes ago? I could have gotten two, right? I didn't have to get just one. And he's like, well, you don't really need it. And I thought, what are you, my diet coach now? But I was like, okay, all right. And it wasn't that far away, so I didn't have time to get tempted to eat it, right? It was like, so I pull up, and here's this poor older man who is just dripping in sweat because it's Florida. I don't care what time of year it is, you're going to be dripping in sweat. And you could see like steam coming off his water bottle. And so as I get out of my car, I'm like, here, I have an ice cream for you. He was so happy. And so often that's the kind of promptings I get. Like, who knows what he was praying. Yeah,
that's beautiful. Really. I love it. And, so I'm looking forward to digging into your books more. Now I'm torn though, because I don't know which one, because I really I said first I want the to-do one. I want to hear that.
You should always start with that. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm liking all three, right?
Well, the third one's not in print yet. It's just waiting to be in print.
Okay.
But it's not in print yet. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, definitely people should go to inhisfootsteps.com and, sign up for the newsletter, which I
think I did, didn't I?
Probably.
Yeah, I think I did when I found you. I think I did. But anyway, give us all those websites and all of that right now, so we can make sure we don't forget that.
Well, it's inhisfootsteps.com, and then and that has links on it to my social media. So basically, I hang out at Instagram and Facebook. That's basically
Excellent. Okay, so in his footsteps.
Yeah.
So the I is capital, the H is capital, and the F is capital in footsteps.
Well, you don't have to capitalize it because Google, as long as it says in his footsteps, all run together. Google's happy.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. So, Margaret, thank you so much for being on our show today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You. It's been a lot of fun. I love your stories, by the way. Now, do you do any YouTube or anything?
Do I what?
Do YouTube? Post anything on YouTube?
No, I have some things on YouTube that people can go and watch. I read some stories from the book on there, and my Christmas stories are on there.
Okay. Okay, good. So we'll if it's okay, we'll add that as well. Because what we do takes about 6 weeks for us to post the episode. And then we add all your socials and website and everything so people know where to find you. So guys, that's what we like to hear, because people need to see and hear things.
I know.
Okay, well, thank you, Margaret. It was a pleasure talking with you today. And this is the 2.0 show sounding off. Until next time.
Grandma's 2.0 is here to remind us that it's never too late to dream and achieve, regardless of our age. Our mission is simple yet profound. We focus on redefining life for grandmas and empowering them to pursue their dreams and aspirations. With a philosophy grounded in partnership, teamwork, and unwavering support, we believe that, given the right encouragement, grandmas can achieve their dreams and rewrite the narrative of their lives. We firmly believe that no dream is too big or too small when you have the right support system in place. Grandma's 2.0 is all about creating partnerships and networks that empower grandmas to achieve their goals. Our community is a place where grandmas can connect, collaborate, and inspire one another. We understand that success is a collective effort, and we are here to provide the platform for those connections to flourish. Sometimes, life takes unexpected turns, and dreams get put on hold. At Grandma's 2.0, we help grandmas redefine, realign, and redesign their lives. With determination, support, and a positive mindset, grandmas can shatter the stereotypes and limitations placed on them by society. Grandma's 2.0 is not just an organization, it's a movement. It's a call to action for grandmas everywhere to embrace their dreams, aspirations, and the infinite possibilities life still holds. Together, we're proving that age is not a limitation but an opportunity. It's our time to dream and achieve. And Grandma's 2.0 is here to make that journey extraordinary.